and welcome to another episode of the latest thread. So, today we were thinking about talking business, some business related topics. This will pertain to people that are maybe thinking about starting a long arm business, and most of us have been in business for quite some time. Some of us are no longer quilting for others, but most of us still are. So, the first topic we're going to talk about communication with the customers because that is super important because they made a beautiful quilt or a special quilt, and we have to figure out how we can enhance that quilt top that they made with quilting. And I find it really tricky, especially if it's a new customer to me, because I have to, before I even get to the quilting design part, I kind of have to figure out what it is, who they are. Aside from the fact that I want to find out, how they want to use the quilt once it's finished, but I'd like to know a little bit about their personality because, that tells me, you know, how they see their quilt to be finished, because a lot of customers tell me anyhow, oh, I have no idea, you're the professional. And you can take that two ways. Either yes, they're going to have a lot of confidence in what I'm going to do with their quilt, or number two, they want to test me to see what do I even know what I'm doing, or they simply have no idea what they want because their goal and their fun part is making the quilt, and they have no idea. So I have to, in order to advise them, learn more about them, because if we're not on the same page, the result can be devastating.
It might not be a return customer. Right?
That is true. So, in that regard, to sum it up, I just want to learn more about them before I even consider giving them options. So, anyone else?
That's a good way to do that, is to learn more about them as a person. And like, social media is such a valuable tool, right? We can creep their pages. No, I'm serious. You can look at their Instagram pages. If they're a public page, you can look, and if you have to friend them, then you wait for them to give you the blessing on that. But you can get that kind of feel for who they are and their style by looking at some of their work and possibly some of the other quilting things that they've shared over a period of time. So that's a good idea too.
That's a good idea, but depending on where you're located, like I'm looking at my clientele, and not so much on social media.
Right.
As they're older. Not that older people can't be on social media, but it really makes a difference, where you're located and who your clientele is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. So I think a lot of times customers think they know what they want, and then you have to, some people you can tell right away if you're going to be able to change their mind, because maybe that that's not the best choice, like maybe you're not going to see the quilting at all. And I know this, and you're just going to pay more money for something that you're still not going to be able to see, but then I have some other people who, like one lady in particular, she's just a feather lady. So she doesn't care what you do. As long as it involves feathers, she's good. It can be an all over feather if it works for that quilt, or it could be, custom, but it just has to be feathers. So I think it's really good the longer that you do it. In the beginning, I would meet with people and they want this here and that there. And it was like, oh, I don't like this at all. So it didn't take too long before they started to just give them to me. And I know a lot of people say they hate when someone gives them a quilt and says, do whatever you think. But I loved it. And still to this day, that's pretty much all I do. So they give me the quilt. I'll tell them what I'm thinking. And, you know, it's worked out well, mostly. One time, not. She told me to do whatever I wanted. And I got a phone call. And it's this lady. And I'm like, oh, she's calling to tell me how much she loves it. And she's like, I hate this quilt.
No.
What? And she said, I said, well, you told me to do whatever I wanted, what I thought would work. And that's what I did. And she said, but I didn't think you'd do that. And it was like, no. And I didn't refund her. I didn't. You explicitly told me to do what I thought. And that is what I did. So, you know, it's, I don't know. I like when they tell you to do what you think as opposed to wanting to point out every design.
Well, yeah, when they do that to me, like when they say I want this here and I want this, it like takes my creativity and just chops it. Like
Yeah.
I have no thoughts on this now. I'm like a robot quilting at that point. And that's not fun. It doesn't come through in your quilting as like you're at your best in that. And it kills the creativity.
It definitely does.
But, you know, I found too that, you know, maybe not with a brand new person, but for someone that you've quilted for a while and you know their general, you know, likes and dislikes, I think you can plan it out. And I do appreciate their input to some extent, but I usually tell them, you know, we can audition all we want, but sometimes as you see it coming to life, I tell them, I've changed my mind in that area because I really felt that what I decided to do instead, you know, would work much better. And they're usually okay. But to Jody's point too, I just thought about, you know, for the customer that didn't like it, you know, if they give input, I usually, or even if we just have conversation, I make some sort of notation, you know, on the work order sheet. I just use, you know, printable work order sheet, and I make notations on that, you know, so there's no misunderstanding, you know. Do I always stick to it, as I just mentioned? Not always, but, you know, usually it works out just fine. But aside from communication, I think writing down what you're discussing is equally important because, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I generally have them sign the work order or at least acknowledge of some sort that that's what we talked about. So, because no, I don't want a refund either or rib out for them. No way.
Yeah.
Well, and I will say too, with that particular woman, you know, there are, I think we all want to say that quilters are not really nice people. And I think we all are mostly, but this particular woman, you know, I think it's good to network with your fellow long armors, whether they're just in your area or whatever, because I told another quilter in my area about it. And she right away said, what is her name? So it turned out that this was this lady's game. So she tried every long arm quilter, and then she would try to not pay. So
yeah, luckily those
That's
are
a whole different problem.
That's a whole different problem.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a level of trust that they have to have for us in first, though. I mean, it's like my first career was as a hairdresser. I got my hairdressing license, and you know, not many people would come in and say, just do whatever you want, right? You got to walk around with that on your head for the next at least 6 weeks, right? So I think it's kind of the same thing where people need to look at our work previously in order to say, I like that person's style, in order to trust them enough to say, do whatever you think. They have to do their homework on us as well, and the long armor that they've chosen. Otherwise, the first few times, yes, consultation, but after you develop that kind of relationship and that rapport and the trust, and you kind of be like, okay, they drop it off and say, just do whatever. Yeah, we love that. But I think it takes them a while sometimes. Those are precious creations of theirs, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And also, aside from the fact that the times have changed due to the coronavirus, but before then, I do prefer to meet people in person, for the simple fact that we also have to try to protect ourselves as long-arm quilters and business people, because if you are able to look over a quilt with them right there, and there's some issues, with the quilt, whatever it may be, it's a lot easier to address that than if you're just, like right now, maybe handed it back, or, the quilt's left on your front porch, with the social distancing. But I do prefer, if possible, to have the quilt, there with them to look at, because we have to protect ourselves also.
Like 90% of my customers just ship their quilts to me. So most of my consultations are done with photos and emails, You can't see the fluff in most photos. So yeah, there's still phone consults after that. So so I don't know, drop off and pick up hasn't changed greatly over here, with most of my stuff coming by UPS anyway.
Yeah, in the very beginning, I would, have them come over, but I very quickly put an end to that, because they come over, a lot of them, and they bring their two girlfriends, or they bring their husband, and that's fine, but it goes from a drop off and let's talk about it to they've been there for 2 hours, and now we're just want to see how the machine worked. It becomes like I could have done another quilt in the time that they were there, and I'm not charging them for that time. So it really got to be too much for me. So I switched to, I'll meet you in a quilt shop. I will meet you. Mostly my favorite is to just meet them in a parking lot somewhere.
Because it makes it uncomfortable. Yeah.
If they have ideas, they'll tell me. I'll tell them what I think. I can peek in the bag and see what it is. Otherwise, I just take it home and I look at it, and then I tell them what I think. So it just, it's a tricky thing. And like if you have a dog, so now if they're going to come to your house, you have to worry about putting the dog away. And it just, for me, was like, oh my gosh, no, it's just too much.
I had
some of them love to see the dogs, though, eh?
Yes and no. Well, like I had a lady come and she brought her husband, and I'm talking with her, and I looked over and he's not in the studio anymore. I'm like, excuse me. He goes, oh, what's over here? He was like all the way through my family room, just walking through my house, and I'm like, oh, no, this is not going to work. Just wandered around.
I think when it comes to that, we have our own preferences, some of them are maybe of us are more particular for whatever reason, or maybe some things work better for us than some other things, but I don't know. I just like to be sure that that's what, they want, and I want them to look at it with me. Doesn't mean it's easy if you see it's a total crappy quilt and they think, it's going to go to Paducah or somewhere. I mean, you get that quite a bit. Yeah. And, but you have to be tactful. But I still think it's easier, yeah, I know, that can be difficult.
I can't be tactful. It's like...
I can see that now. It's hard, but... But, I just prefer to do that in person, because our business, for the most part, is mouth by mouth, referral business, or at least it used to be for me, and so in my area, have a ton of long-arm quilters, and at this particular time, I'm not worried about, not having enough business, because, cut back some of the customer quilting. But still, I still don't want negative feedback to affect my reputation as a business owner. So therefore, I'm going to do what works best for me to ensure that, I handle it as professional as I possibly can.
Mhm.
Well, I think we're going to take a break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about how we audition these signs and, stuff like that. We'll see what we come up with. So see you in a bit.
Hi guys, Karen Marchetti here. We are in Gamel Studio and we are going to have a bunch of fun today. Okay, I would love to share with you guys today the My Stitch feature on the Vision 2 because it is my favorite feature. My Stitch presets are right here. You have two options and we right now are going to set the first one to regulate 13 stitches per inch. So I just press and hold. Now it's programmed. And the other one I would like to change constant 35. Whoop. So then we're going to press and hold number 2. I have programmed these to the A button. So whenever I press the A button, it's going to, on the fly, switch between those two stitches. And I'll share in a minute, I'll share a couple other options that you can use that for. But right now I want to share how I do ruler work and constant work together. Okay, so I brought up my bobbin thread, and I am in regulated mode with the ruler because I have to be in regulated mode when I have a ruler because I have to pay attention. So as I press the My Stitch, now I am immediately in constant mode. Press it again, and I'm right back into regulated. There's no stopping, there's no starting, it just on the fly changes. That is my very favorite feature. Okay, another thing about the My Stitch Select, I based all my quilts. So what I'm going to do is switch this to based, take a 1/4 inch, program 1, and then I'm going to take my based up to 3 inches and program the other button. This way, when I'm basting, I can easily switch between the two. When I press the My Stitch, I'm at a 1/4 inch for my edges and my top. I'm at 3 inches for when I baste across. Makes it very easy to do. The last reason I really like the My Stitch is because when I stitch my feathers, I am in, say, constant, about 50 to 60% motor. And then when I do my fills, I'm at about 35% motor. Okay, so let me show you how on the fly we can switch between those two speeds. Okay, so when I stitch my feathers, I'm going to be in a constant, between 50 and 60 is my comfort zone, so we're at 56 right now. So I just start stitching. And I'm doing my feathers, and life is wonderful. And without having to even change size, speed, I just press the My Stitch preset, and now I'm at 35% motor for a nice small fill. So then after I do my fill, we hit the My Stitch preset again, and I'm right back to 50% motor. So no time is wasted in having to change your stitch speed or your stitch length. And it makes life a lot easier.
Okay, we're back. We're back from break. So the next topic we want to address is how do we audition the design? So we were just saying, well, they can't see in our head, so we have to kind of let out what is in our head in regards to our suggestions so they understand what we have in mind. I think one of the things we also need to consider is, the budget, because we shouldn't be able to just offer one option, the high-end option, which I think most of us, a lot of time, we prefer to do an edge to edge if at all possible, because, frankly, you make your money quickly, more quickly than with the custom. And not all quilts warrant custom work. Do we do in the end what the customer wants? Sure, probably, most of us, but that doesn't mean we can't steer them in a direction. So therefore, we got to be able to offer different options. So, anyone?
I'll go. If it's an edge to edge, it's simple because they say, and I always say trains. I don't know why, but if they want trains, I'm going to show them the different train designs I have. And I don't know why I go to trains all the time. But, that makes it a little easier. And then it's just, the density of the design, how, large or small you're going to do it. But on custom quilts, I almost always draw it right on a picture of the quilt. And I may do one corner as a quick custom and the other corner as a full-blown heirloom custom, and then give them the option to do this one's this much, and to do all this, it's this much. But we can always land somewhere in the middle, so.
So you said that you have your quilt shipped. So in other words, you ask for a picture of the quilt before you even accept the job. And then you can obviously print it out. I've also learned the hard way, because a lot of times, because I have people come to the house with their quilt, if I have a brain cramp that day, I might not be able to think of anything. I'm just not there in my head. I'm not in a good place to come up with different quilting designs. So I do ask them to also email or text me a picture. That gives me the opportunity before they come over, to have, something ready. Because to me, there's nothing worse than if you're just stuttering and stumbling about and can't. I mean, it happens, at least to me. I don't know. You probably all can think of something, but I sometimes can't. So that's another way for me to be prepared and print it out as well, and then can draw on it.
Or even if they tell you like if it's a patterned quilt, they tell you the pattern name and you'll Google it and look at it and get a visual idea. And then they bring it, it's got 5 extra borders, but yeah.
I think that can be really challenging to draw it all ahead of time on a piece of paper. I find that whenever I've done that, because it's not to the same scale as the quilt itself, then I get to the quilt and I have to change things.
It's always like that. It's never exact.
Yeah. So, and the way I like to quilt is just a very organic. I know one thing I want to do, and I do that, and then it leads me to something else. Mm-hmm. I find it really hard to commit to saying, this is exactly how I'm going to quilt everything. So with a customer, there may be some things that I say, okay, tell me something that you really love, and maybe tell me something that you really don't want to have on your quilt. Because I have customers that don't like feathers. Doesn't matter what it is, just don't put the opposite of yours, Jody.
Yeah.
So just give me some kind of parameters, and or have them look through some of your social media posts that you've already done and get an idea of some of the styles that they like or the density of quilting that they like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a really hard time making a plan and sticking to that with quilts.
I'm with you, Sharon. I kind of have the same, I can't commit to that because I don't know. And I mean, I could have their quilt for a month and I could look at it And then I'll think of something and I might pull it out again and look at it. And now what I think I want to do is totally different. So for me, I love the fact that almost always, I mean, they just tell me to do what I think, because I don't want to, have to draw it out, and then I don't want to do it now. And then I have to do it if I tell them that's what I'm doing. A lot of times with new quilters, they don't know what there is. They don't know the quilting designs, and we'll say, oh, I could do this over here. They don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
Or they think they just want, I don't know, an all over meander type of thing. And I'm like, but I can do this all over. That's prettier than meander, but that's all that they've seen. So they don't know,
Or you think it costs more to have something other than a meander. Yeah.
Sure. And, feathers are faster than a meander. So, I like kind of not having a set plan until it's on there and I'm looking at it.
Do you ever find that you have an idea rolling around in your head for some sort of design, and whatever the next quilt up gets that? I'm going to find some way to take that idea rolling around and make it suit that quilt somehow.
Yeah.
Then that's when you really get to enjoy the creativity of the process, right?
And like that, I always have a plan, and 2/3 through the quilt, I'm like, oh, I should have done this. Like, I have this brilliant idea. So now I have to I do it for myself. I'll do a whole new drawing, because I get a lot of the repeat quilts. Like, they'll say, oh, I saw this quilt. Can you do this one? So now I have that really good idea for next time. So,
yeah.
Do you do them all? I do them all differently. Whenever because I do some for a shop that they have the block of the month or program, and I get like 18 of the same quilt, and I have to do
I want this exactly like hers. And I'm like, yeah, but you added a sashing here. It can't, no matter what I do, I have to go, the sashing interferes with that design. So,
That's a tip, so if you quilt, my biggest nightmare was this one quilt shop where they asked me to do the shop sample for the block of the month. And obviously, so it's going to hang in the shop. So I did it really super nice. Now, every single person wanted it just like that. And it was like, what? No, I don't want to do that on all of these. But the bonus was that, after I did about 4 or 5, it was like nothing. I could get them done in record time because it was just like you were on auto quilt. So
what's your number that drives you nuts? Like, if I get the same quilt 3 times, I'm good. That 4th one, I'm like, ugh, that's it. The 4th one is the number that breaks me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And when it's
that's
a block of the month
point too, if you have a certain style and they like that style, no matter how time consuming, like with that red work quilt I was working on, oh, I want your fill. Great. So if you have a certain style, and it doesn't matter if it's maybe more costly, because clearly that's more time consuming to quilt, but that's what they want. So it's the same thing, whether it's a shop sample, you kind of get a reputation, for a certain style, and then you have to be willing to do that. I posted a quilt. It was a baby quilt. It was a panel not too long ago for my new granddaughter. And it was also like a fill. And somebody said, can you tell me where you got that panel? Sure. And then can you quilt it exactly like that? No.
It was beautiful, though.
No, I didn't, commit to doing that.
Is that the elephant one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cute.
Yeah, but it's for special little girls. So I can't.
Well, sure, their little girl is special
Same
too.
ideas and use them in different ways, right? You don't always have to do it exactly, but you can say, okay, you want feathers and pebbles and swirls, but maybe I can combine them in a different way. So you still get that overall feel that they like, but it's not identical.
Yeah, so auditioning designs, that can be tricky, especially, it's tricky if they want to mail the quilt, but they still want to have input, on the edge-to-edge design. So then it's more time consuming for you, because I can't ask them to browse all the websites to, see what they like. So I have to browse, and then at least send them 4 or 5 different, images of what I
A
think
lot.
might work, and then if they don't like it, I have to start over. Especially, I just had to do that for someone I had never quilted before, so I did not know what they liked,
So,
and the quilt that they had made, you had a lot of options, so that part can become more time consuming for you.
But do you charge for that? I mean, that's a lot of time. Are you like charging a, I
research.
don't know, consultation fee or something?
No, no.
I have a customer that sends me pictures of someone else's quilting constantly. And it's a fairly well-known person, the name that they, and I said, maybe you should get them to quilt. No, like, here's my website with all of my styles, all of my quilting, all of my kind of, and no, I want it just like this. I'm like, yeah, well, that's not how I quilt, so that gets hard too. But yeah, Ava, you should definitely be charging a design research fee or something. That's your time and effort.
Yeah.
Well, and I've had people too, Karen, where they make a quilt in a book is usually it, or else they'll say, I'm going to send the pattern picture in with the quilt because, I want it quilted how it's quilted. And one that always stands out to me is years and years ago. This lady sent me a quilt, and it was it's supposed to look like cross stitching. It's an Eleanor Burns quilt, and it was little 2-inch squares or something. It was the entire quilt, and she wanted it quilted just like the book, which was easy enough. Cross hatching. Well, at that time, I despised ruler work.
Mm-hmm.
I was not doing this. And so, I mean, I had absolutely no problem because the quilter who quilted all of her quilts is a friend of mine and was very close in distance to me. And I said, please call her. I'm sure she would love to. So sometimes, like, if it's just not me, this just
Right.
isn't. No, I have no problem. Please take it to someone else. And usually that particular woman I've quilted for years because she actually wrote me a letter and said, thank you so much. I got exactly what I wanted. And I appreciate that you were willing to send me where I needed to go to get what I wanted. And she brought everything else to me after. So it was great because I didn't want to, oh my gosh, the thought of cross hatching a queen size quilt. No.
I've done that. Yeah. I'll give you a list of 10 other long armors that will gladly cross hatch for you. I will not.
Yeah. I mean, now I would take it in a second, but then no way.
I still hate full cross hatching.
Oh yeah.
Little tiny cross hatching. Sure.
And that's a good point, though. Again, depending on what area you're in and what your customers make.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the style is not necessarily what you want to quilt, which sometimes it's good if they give you free reign, because then you kind of can, because I believe in kind of keeping it to the feel of the quilt. Like if it's a reproduction, I want to stay in that time period with the quilting designs. But if they give me free reign and I absolutely don't like the quilt, I can incorporate something that I enjoy quilting in it so I can get over it. But I find that it takes me a lot longer to jump into getting that quilt quilted, because it's just not my thing. But,
I think that shows in your quilting too, though. If you're not like into the design, I don't think your quilting sings as much as when you're happy in quilting or you're it's your own style.
Well, I usually find that I'm okay once I get started, because
Yeah.
then, it's a job. I start here, I finish here. I don't necessarily want to say it wouldn't get the same attention than something I love, but it's just harder emotionally to get
Yeah.
into it. Because, I think most of us don't look at this necessarily as a job. Like if you're stamping out parts in a factory, there is a, emotional thing, like, your creativity is part, and you invest something of yourself into that quilt, So, but, some of them are just more inspiring than others.
But
Louder here. Oh, sorry, Jody.
well, and I think there's a little bit of a flip, depending on, if you've been quilting for a really long time for other people, you have to be really careful, because that it can cause burnout, which is awful, because it's like, and I've had it 2 times in 20 some years. And the first time wasn't so bad. I just took a break. I made a quilt for myself, and that cured it. Like, I got to do my thing, and okay, now I can do these other things. But the second time was, I just felt like, because if you're getting quilt after quilt after quilt, that isn't something in it that you enjoy, or, they want it quilted ways that aren't, yes, I do this, but it just is so killing me. And you can start to feel like your creativity is just like being squashed. Like, I am not having
out of you
outlet at all. So that's why I think it's super important. You have to take breaks and do things for yourself to kind of keep that in check sometimes.
And that's a really hard thing to learn. It was for me anyhow, because, I was building a business, some years ago, and I never got over the fear that it can end at any time if I don't just do what is expected to me, to the point where I'm still quilting customer quilts on Christmas Eve instead of doing Christmas Eve things. That was a long time ago, but I was so afraid, because the type of business that we're in, that it can end at any time. And, most of us do that partly because we have to earn a living. That's one of the reasons we do that.
But that's with everything. Everything can end at any given time.
Right. But initially, that was my biggest fear. And I would my husband said, mark yourself time off on the calendar where you do, like Jody said, something for yourself. And I did do that. However, then people called, and all of a sudden that week was gone because I filled it in with customer quilts.
You gave away your own time, and that's
right.
big.
And that's why I said that was a really hard lesson for me to learn. I've learned it well now, but, because you're right, you get to a burnout point. You really do. And then you can get to the point where you resent the phone ringing and another quilt, honestly. And I don't want to get to that. I did get to that point, and I told my husband I need to take a break, period, because there was other things we were doing with the educator thing. And, it was a great opportunity to not have to worry about coming home from trips and having these quilts sitting there, and now I'm gradually taking them in again, but it's on my terms,
And I've said this before, like after I do a big giant custom quilt, it's been on my frame 3 weeks, I throw up fabric, I don't care what it is, and I just play. I get back to that creative, just play. It's, I call it recess, but you need that. You need what keeps you inspired to keep doing what you want to do. You know what I mean? You have to have that.
Yeah, so we all have different thoughts on that. Okay, I think that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed our topics. I enjoyed sitting around with everyone and having a good conversation. So, and please don't forget, we're still waiting to get you guys' input on the Facebook groups. Remember, we're looking for a hashtag, the latest thread, because, we want to address what interests everybody else. And so leave your comments or your feedback and suggestions on the Facebook groups, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.